When floodwaters started to recede in southeast Queensland, real estate agent Daniel Burrell noticed a stark change in queries from potential investors. Key points: recent flooding has prompted investors to ask more questions about a property's history. Recent flooding has prompted investors to ask more questions about a property's history. Agents say some investors have boycotted flood-prone areas in Brisbane. Agents say some investors have boycotted flood-prone areas in Brisbane. A climate risk analyst says people living in flood-prone areas need support to adapt to climate change. It started prompting the questions of, did this flood? Is it in a flood zone? What happened in 2022? What happened in 2011? Mr. Burrell said. They are even stretching back that far now, just asking about properties and what happened to them. The Toowoomba property agent said despite the city escaping major flooding this year, the issue had become front of mind for buyers not only concerned about potential damage, but also the cost of insurance in flood-prone areas. Not having to worry about getting insurance that can handle flooding or making sure they've got enough to cover it. It's reassuring for them, Mr. Burrell said. Areas boycotted. The flood is also shifting preferences of interstate buyers looking for a property in Brisbane, as 2 major floods in 11 years made them have second thoughts. 2 weeks ago, they were saying, "I'm all right with that being a low-risk flood area," said buyers advocate Wendy Russell. But now they are just boycotting it and saying, "No, we absolutely don't want to buy in any area that's flood-impacted." Buyers agent Wendy Russell says she expects buyers will avoid flood-prone areas in the short term. Climate risk analyst and the chief executive officer of firm Climate Valuation, Carl Mallon, said with extreme weather events becoming more frequent, savvy buyers were now starting to ask quite pertinent questions. "What we're finding is that your millennial homebuyers are now climate aware," he said. "They want to understand the climate change impacts on a property, whether that's flooding, sea level rise, forest fire." Mr. Mallon said buyers concerned about natural disasters should ask certain questions. Is it in a floodplain? What return frequency is the flood? Is the building elevated above the ground? When was it built? Was it built to a building standard, say before 1990? Or after 2000, he said. With that kind of information, you can make a very good assessment of the resilience of the building. There are calls to help people in flood-prone areas adapt to climate change with more frequent flooding. Climate change concerns. CoreLogic property data analyst Eliza Owen said, based on 2011 flooding in Brisbane, property prices would likely drop in the short term. But climate change could further exacerbate buyers' concerns. These events, that were supposed to be one every 100 years, have turned into higher frequency extreme weather events, Ms. Owen said. And, of course, this is one of the implications of climate change, so I think that these kinds of events have the capacity to really shift demands the more frequent they are. CoreLogic's head of research Eliza Owen. Mr. Mallon said after the cleanup finished, authorities would also need to consider what should happen to people whose homes were not insured. There needs to be some very significant soul-searching in terms of what we do to support those people to adapt to climate change, he said. We should be really thinking about grants for upgrading these buildings to be climate change ready. Investor demand. While investors might be avoiding flood-prone areas for now, Ms. Russell had her doubts about how long that would last. There are still a lot of investors looking to buy in Brisbane. The Olympic Games has been a huge driver for investors, Ms. Russell said. I do believe, moving forward, that people will forget and then it will just go back to business, as usual with property. Find more local news, tell us your location, and find more local ABC news and information. Loading.